A new report from the New York Times says that Vladimir Putin is now open to ending the war in Ukraine and could be ready to make a deal. So if Putin is willing to stop the violence after nearly 2 years of fighting, shouldn't the U.S. be doing everything in its power to make this happen? I mean, even if you are the most ardent Ukraine supporter, isn't a potential solution better than the current stalemate? Even if it means surrendering limited amounts of Ukrainian territory. Two former senior Russian officials close to the Kremlin told the New York Times Putin has been signaling through intermediaries since at least September that he's open to a ceasefire that freezes the fighting along the current lines, far short of his ambitions to dominate Ukraine. Now, this is a stark change from Putin's posturing on the war over the last 2 years. He's made it clear he wants to conquer Ukraine and force out President Zelensky, reiterating that just weeks ago.
The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine and its neutral status.
You hear that, you think, is this talk of a deal even real? Look, American officials also told the Times Putin sent out, quote, feelers in the fall of 2022 to test the waters of a ceasefire. Those talks apparently went nowhere. According to U.S. intel, Russia has now lost nearly 90% of its pre-war military, over 300,000 troops killed or wounded. Ukraine has put up an incredibly brave fight, but they haven't been able to retake much of their lost territory. Russia still has operational control of 4 Ukrainian regions and a land corridor to Crimea, which they annexed in 2014. So while it's certainly not ideal, shouldn't Ukraine be open to talking, or at the very least, should the U.S. be pushing Zelensky and Ukraine into possible peace talks? Congress is losing its appetite for Ukraine as the House is divided now over sending more aid. We've already committed over $100 billion in military and humanitarian assistance. And with the Israel-Hamas conflict taking over the world stage too, the U.S. is going to have a tough time continuing to help fund 2 major international conflicts. Now, critics will argue that Putin will sell this as a victory. He'll still hold parts of Ukraine, convince the Russian people that he's reunified the Soviet Union, and that, most importantly, he'll remain a threat. And my next guest is one of those critics. Joining me now is Pifer, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Ambassador Pifer, thanks very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. So what am I missing here? Why shouldn't the U.S. be pushing very hard to end the fight?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that we've seen from Moscow a serious readiness to negotiate. Just 3 or 4 days ago, Vladimir Putin said he was open to negotiation on a settlement on Russian terms. On Russian terms mean Ukraine surrenders 20% of its land, Crimea, plus the 4 oblasts, the 4 provinces that Russia claims to have annexed 15 months ago, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And they claim to have annexed those even though they don't fully occupy those. But also, the Russians demand demilitarization by Ukraine, which would mean that at any future point, the Russian army could walk right in.
Right.
And they talk about denazification, which is removal of a government that's headed by a Jewish president.
Right. So let's assume that let's assume for a moment that he doesn't really mean that. Right. Let's assume for a moment that the New York Times reporting is relatively accurate, that Putin would be willing to enter into a deal to keep the borders and lines where they are today, which means significant increases in Russian ownership over Ukrainian land. Is that something where the U.S., putting aside, let's assume the rest of it is not on the table, is that something where the U.S. government should be pushing Zelensky to say, at least you got to start talking?
I would argue no, because I think there has to be from Moscow some kind of a message to the Ukrainians that, they are prepared actually to move away from their maximalist demands. At this point, if you're sitting there in the shoes of President Zelensky, you don't see an offer on the table other than total capitulation. And I think for Zelensky, so there's 2 questions here. One is, will the Russians be prepared to back away from some of their maximalist demands and negotiate in a serious way? And the second question is, Zelensky also has to worry that any kind of concessions he's prepared to make could be hugely controversial within Ukraine, where polls consistently show that a large majority of Ukrainians want to keep fighting and liberate all Ukrainian territory.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.